Oh, beautiful Cora.
As it was in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Isn't this gorgeous?
And beautiful sunlight. Beautiful sunny day today. So here we are in the forest, among the trees, and the sunlight is just making itself known.
Mm-hmm. Good introduction, Louise. You're getting better and better. People are going to be happy with you. But as long as I'm happy with you, that's the important thing. Eh?
Yes.
If our happiness together radiates onto the screen, and it's a lovely, genuine, relationship.
Then it will appeal to all those who striving to have a happy marriage.
That is correct. That is correct. But I was thinking, Louise, years ago, we saw a show called From Moment to Moment.
From moment to moment. Like I remember, not another line.
Take your call out all the puppies out there,
Oh boy, that was a really, what shall I say, a real emotional type of film. You found yourself shedding some tears. You find yourself feeling sorry for the wife. You find yourself feeling sorry for the husband. It was so perplexing, You didn't know who to blame for what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, we weren't even married right when we saw that movie. And I remember being very mixed up about this movie. But as years have gone on and you become mature and you face maybe not your own experience, but you hear the experiences of others, then you realize you can't be judgmental. Why or who's wrong, because it really have both sides to the story,
Definitely.
And in that movie, clearly, as an onlooker, as a young person, I remember having mixed feelings, feeling sorry for the wife, feeling sorry for the husband who was working so hard. How could she be unfaithful to him? But then, as I say, as you grow older and you mature and you can think through things and you start looking at things on both sides, not one track, then you say, not that you make it right, but you kind of say, well, it wasn't hard to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that the person was a bad person, but certain circumstances led to what happened.
Very true, very true. But you remember the storyline?
Yes, very well. Because as I say, it had me really confused and concerned. You took it to heart,
Mm-hmm.
You took it to heart because here it is, you are going to get married and you see a movie where a wife is being unfaithful to a husband who was hard working, and you feel, but how could she do that? The man is out there working, bringing in an income, making her comfortable with all her natural needs because she lived a very good standard of life in the movie, And so what happened was that he was a psychiatrist, and he was really very involved in his job.
Right.
He had lots of patients to deal with. He had all their stories, all their worries was upon his head, and he had to find solution for these people. And sometimes, some cases, it's almost impossible to come up with a solution. It's like you're going wrong in circles. And you just can't get to the root of the problem.
But let me interject here. Would you say that when a company has what do you call it, EAP?
Yeah.
EAP.
Assistant plan.
You remember, even when you had to resort once to twice to the EAP.
Yeah.
What did you make of the psychologist you came across? There were times when they were baffled about certain clients, I'm sure. But in your experience, how did they really help you?
With my problem, it was a one and done situation. You know, I was having problems on the job, and you know, I felt that there was confusion. People, other employees was talking, or employee was talking to the boss, and when he behaved in a certain manner, you know, I just always took it so personal.
Right.
And when I went and I spoke to the psychologist, you know, he pointed out to me that, you know, why should you take things personal? You don't know what type of day the man was having, what day, when he left home, if he had a fallout with his wife. So if he comes next morning and he slams the door, and why should you be affected by that, you know? And then it was a straight case of coming to terms with that people are different, and that, you know, in my growing up in a home that where people, you looked out for each other. It was a whole brand new experience.
Right.
You know? And the other, so that was it. It was easy. It was not a complicated situation. It wasn't, you know? And the other time was I would cry at funerals. Every funeral I went to, I would cry and be so emotional. I'd get a lump in my throat. And we had a few deaths. Young people died in company, and everyone is really traumatized of the deaths of these young people. And they got me a psychologist to come in and have midday seminar with the staff. And I remember attending that seminar. And the doctor was speaking about, you know, many times somebody died and people are so affected, and it's like, well, I never knew they were so close. How come they so traumatized by this death? And she said, you know, sometimes that person is not crying for this particular person, and it is possible that it is an unresolved grief, you know, so that when you go to a funeral, it's a reminder of someone that you loved and you did not grieve for them. So the grief comes up when you attend funeral because it's a reminder. And I thought, but this makes a lot of sense. So she said, anybody who felt that it upset them, feel free to talk with her. And an appointment was made. And while I was there waiting, the person who I was supposed to see got caught in traffic. And he called another psychologist, and he said, well, if he can fill in for him. And he just very, very casually said to me, so your psychologist is not going to be here, but he has asked me to fill in. So what is really the problem? So I said, well, you know, this psychologist had come in, and what she said made sense to me about grief, unresolved grief. Because I cry at every funeral where I remember going lunch with you to a funeral. I didn't even know the employee that you worked with. His father died, and I went with you to the funeral. And I was crying so much that afterwards, somebody said to me, thanks for the tears. And I wasn't paid to be a mourner. So when that button was pressed by that psychologist, I knew this is for me. And I had no hang up about it.
Okay, let me ask a question here. Before having gone to that psychologist, what part did I play in trying to alleviate whatever stress you were going through? Can you remember? Did I play a focal point in your dilemma at that point?
Well, like,
Because I'm looking at it from the husband point of view now.
yes.
How does a husband help if the wife has a phobia or a taboo placed on psychologists? How does he help? The husband. What should he do?
Well, that's if it is that you're talking about a big problem.
Well,
With my crying at funerals, you just took it that I was soft-hearted.
mm-hmm.
So I don't think that you ever thought that there was a problem.
Okay, there was
But
no problem between us.
There was no problem between
But
us.
if there's a problem between a couple,
Yeah.
what
Well-
should the husband do?
Well, if it is repeatedly problems, ongoing, a circle go around and 6 months later when you think you're moving on, recurring, and so different things keep recurring, and that there's no closure to anything, well, it's one or two things. You probably need some kind of help, counseling, or you just, I don't know what's the problem. Because I think everybody would like to work their marriage.
Yes.
So it's either you all having a problem and you both need counseling. I'm not saying one-sided. But in our case, it was just me crying when I went to funeral.
How do you think that was affecting me?
When crying at a funeral?
No, well, yes. Yeah, these little moments of grief and how
Well,
you
it was short-lived, It
short-lived.
wasn't like days after I cried.
Well, it's a good thing we didn't have too many funerals.
Yeah, it was at the funeral itself, at the graveside, I would just be weeping. It's not like, well, it's a prolonged release of any pressure, anything like that. It was just that. And I recognized when the psychologist pressed the button that I am in that category.
And you got out of it.
And I went, and the guy said to me, so who died in your family? And I said, my mother died when I was 11 years old. And 2 years after, my dad died. And he said, well, how did you feel when your mother died? How did you feel? And I tell you the truth, Lance, I just sat there and cried and cried and cried and cried. And then after a while, I started feeling kind of foolish that you come to a psychologist and all you do is crying. Money to be paid for you to cry.
When you could do that home for free.
Yeah. So he said, you're doing well. And then, well, I just wanted permission to cry more. He said, you're doing very good, very good. And then he said, what happened to you is you never grieve for the death of your parents. And that is quite true, because we were a family of 10, and we ranged from the ages of 2 to 20. So at the death of your parent, your mother particularly, all your 3 older siblings would be comforting you and say, don't cry, everything is going to be okay, don't cry. So it was like crying was not supposed to happen. So if your big sister tell you, don't cry, we will take care of you all, you're reassured, but the grief was never dealt with. Because if you lose a loved one in death, there must be a grief process. And then after you read different books,